Greetings, folks. Today is Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. I'm Tom Landweaver, and this is my YouTube commentary. Well, YouTube did it to me again. They presented a video recommended for me, and of course I made an MP3 of it because I want you to hear it. I'll give you the link to the video. Now, Glenn Beck, I've already said he was a jerk, and he's here once again proving it. He's complaining about Representative Omar's grilling of Elliott Abrams. The fact is, Elliott Abrams is a criminal. Now, how do I know? Because he needed a presidential pardon. I mean, if you did nothing wrong, you don't need the president to pardon you. Anyway, so she's grilling him about some of his crimes, and you can hear his reaction. You can see it on the video. Like I said, I'm going to give you the link. And Glenn Beck is siding with the criminal. Give a listen.
I'm so sick at the twisted power here, and we give them the power and the authority to say anything to anyone, and as long as they're saying it on the floor or in an official job, no one can say anything about it. But that's only the beginning of this problem. Here she is talking to Elliott Abrams, and she's driving to a point about Venezuela. I want you to listen to Representative Omar.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair.
We have to stop. We have to stop. The Iran-Contra affair? You put somebody in Congress that has never heard of the Iran-Contra affair? Obviously, she's never heard of it. She's reading this. If you see the visual, she is reading it approximately 6 inches away from the paper. Her head is almost all the way down in the desk because she has absolutely no idea what she's talking about. She has no idea what she's talking about, and she thinks it's the Iran-Contra affair because the N looks like an R. So she says Contra. This woman is in Congress. She was elected to Congress. She doesn't even know what the Iran-Contra affair is, and worse than that, she's in the middle of an attack against someone based on something she knows nothing about.
So let's continue on. You're going to need duct tape.
For which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. That was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question.
This is un-American, and this is not her that does it. This happens on both sides, but this is un-American. You cannot continue down this road where these clowns can say whatever they want and you can't respond. If I were him, I would have gotten up. I would not have sat there for this. This is an outrageous attack, and it's not just that. It goes much worse. Listen.
In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no? Do you still think so?
from the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I will
yes
not
or no?
No.
I will.
Sorry, Mr.
I will
Chairman,
take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal.
Stop. Do you think the massacre is a yes or no question? No, I don't. I'll take that as a yes. Excuse me? Excuse me? First of all, what do you think about America that you could even ask that question? There isn't a single American that likes the idea that a massacre happened and we were somehow or another at all involved. America does not like the idea and will go after any troop, and we should, and put them in Leavenworth for the rest of their life if they're killing, maiming, raping people. They are there to protect people. If anyone in our service is there, I can guarantee you it would be 99.9% of the population that would say, yeah, they should rot in Leavenworth.
Of course.
The only reason why it might be lower is because they would think people like this will take and twist it, and now you're held for war crimes for something that you were asked to do.
You're right. Well,
in liberation.
War is ugly. However, rape of 12-year-olds is never involved in it. There's never part of a policy, at least of the United States, that exists for that.
Never. And how dare you? This is an American congresswoman who now says, do you think that was good policy? That was not our policy. But wait, there's more. Listen to the rest.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Good for you.
Whether you, under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question. Because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be.
You are lecturing. You
we
really
believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you.
You are not going to get a serious person to take a serious job in this country if that's who you put in Congress. That is the most insulting thing I've ever heard. Now, there are bad guys, in Congress. There are bad guys in government. There are bad guys in the public sphere. But if you really, truly believe that American interests come above genocide in a country where we are in.
Laughable.
It's laughable, especially how dare you as a Muslim, say those things while we have been fighting and freeing slaves that Muslims have taken because they started a deadly caliphate because we tried to free people.
Ladies and gentlemen, if the worst they can come up with is she misspelled or mispronounced Iran-Contra. I don't know who that idiot was that said, "Stop the tape! We've got to talk about this mispronunciation of this word." You know, she's talking about something and she knows nothing about. Well, let me tell you something, you stupid jerk. I know something about it. I was here. I was aware. She wasn't here. I don't know. She might not have even been born yet. I don't know. Because she's quite young. So just because she doesn't understand or wasn't here to know about Iran-Contra. Now let me tell you something. I don't remember much about it because I never had to remember much about it. But I was here. I know there were hearings after hearings after hearings. Well, let's see. Back in the 80s, I was still living at home. We didn't have cable TV, so I didn't see. But it was written up in the newspapers. It was on CBS News and NBC News, and every once in a while, some afternoons, TV stations would not show their normal soaps, and they would show what's going on in Congress about the Iran-Contra hearings. So I remember those days. I remember hearing the name Elliot Abrams. And this is bringing it all back. The man's a criminal. Of course he's a criminal. I mean, if he's not a criminal, why have a presidential pardon? Anyway, I mean, Ollie North probably lied through his teeth. And, you know, I mean, how can you trust these people? How can you trust Elliot Abrams to tell the truth? And that's the point she was making. But Glenn Beck and his entourage of stupid people thinks that we can trust this criminal. Of course, Glenn Beck was once a criminal himself, so of course he's going to side with criminals. Anyway, it's, you know, if this is all you people got on this lady, shut the hell up. I mean, you are really, I mean, if people were going to be honest about it, you are really showing your stupidity in this one. Now, what did Elliot Abrams do? There is an article called The Crimes of Elliot Abrams, and I'll give you the link to that as well. Okay, this was posted on February 18th, 2019, written by Christopher Fons, which, by the way, you can also see on Facebook. The Facebook page is called Counterpunch. All right. Okay, the article goes, last week's completely appropriate and mild questioning of President Trump's Venezuela envoy Elliot Abrams seems to have struck a chord for both critics and U.S. Latin American policy over the years and for the foreign policy establishment. The latter has recoiled in horror that one of their own has actually been publicly taken to task in a congressional setting by a sitting congresswoman, Omar Ilhan. Actually, it's Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota. And the former has rejoiced that at least the crimes of the U.S. Latin American policy of the 80s have been recognized. So what exactly are the crimes of Elliott Abrams? Elliott Abrams is a cipher for U.S. imperialism in Latin America and the world. From the inception of the United States, U.S. business interests and political leaders have coveted the natural resources, strategic positions, markets, and labor of Latin America. Thomas Jefferson was horrified by the first half-blown republic in the hemisphere, Haiti, and imposed an embargo. Founder and President James Monroe was so grandiose in his view of the future imperial republic that his doctrine basically proclaimed backyard status for the entire hemisphere in 1823, and on and on and on. Now let's see. He talks a little about Cuba. He talks about the Cold War. He talks about various different things that went on in South America, Central America, and so forth. Now, enter Elliott Abrams. With the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980, some of the foreign policy establishment believed that the Nixon and Carter administrations had been too cozy with the communists in China and the Soviet Union, as if killing 3 million people in Vietnam and Laos and allying with the Shah of Iran was humanitarian do-gooderism. Elliott Abrams was in this camp. For Reagan and Abrams, Central America was ground zero for the new Cold War in 1979. Under Jimmy Carter's watch, a popular revolution had occurred in Nicaragua, a country that had been ruled by the Somoza family, whose military force, organized, financed, and trained by the U.S. for kicks, liked to throw peasants and trade unionists into volcanoes from helicopters. After seizing power, the leaders of the revolution, the FSLN, held elections. They won clear majorities. Besides establishing democracy, the FSLN initiated a literacy program, implemented universal health care with help from Cuba, and began a land reform program. Okay. The Reagan administration's strategy was quite simple. In all three countries, they would try to defeat all three revolutionary movements by force. Death squads were used in El Salvador. In Guatemala, a strategic hamlet project was established based on the Phoenix program in Vietnam in the 60s. It basically cordoned off villages so that complete surveillance could take place over entire communities. Elliott Abrams was the point man for U.S. policy in Central America at this time. There was no murder too heinous or atrocity too large that he would not rationalize in the name of anti-communism. His illegal activity and lying to Congress eventually led to a felony conviction, and subsequent pardon for by George H.W. Bush. What this week's testimony was about was not just the vileness of Elliott Abrams and his individual crimes, but the impunity by which Abrams and his ilk have operated over hundreds of years in Latin America and the world. His response was telling. He would not even answer the questions because he and his henchmen want this history to be erased. Okay. Now, the man is guilty of war crimes. Or maybe not war crimes, because we weren't technically at war. But how about war, crimes against humanity, where murder was a weapon to take over various countries in South America? And this during the Reagan administration. I've learned some of this stuff shortly after I started on the internet, and I was shocked to hear some of the things that were going on in the Reagan administration. I mean, I kind of what can you say? I kind of separated Reagan from it because George H.W. Bush was once a director of the CIA. And I kind of believed that it was George H.W. Bush running the show. But then again, Reagan was in charge. He obviously knew what was going on, and what did he do about it? Probably nothing. Anyway, folks, this is the background of Mr. Abrams. The man's a criminal. The man's a murderer. And Glenn Beck is having a fit because Ilhan Omar is questioning him. Hey, Glenn, is it okay to be a criminal in your book? Isn't it okay to drop people out of a helicopter and down into a volcano? Is that okay with you? You are one scumbag. I mean, you don't believe in God, obviously, because you support evil people. My God. And so she can't, there are things that she didn't pronounce right. And yes, I could figure out too that she was probably reading her questions. Maybe that's the way she has to do it. I mean, some people suggest I write out my commentaries before I actually do them. But my reading skills are not the greatest. Glenn Beck, you are one piece of crap. That's my opinion, by the way. And you don't believe in the Constitution. And you certainly don't believe in the Bible. You are not a decent man. You are rotten as the day is long in the summertime. And how can any decent human being support you? Of course, decent human beings don't support you. I don't. And I consider myself a decent human being. But there are people who call themselves Christians who support you. And that is dangerous. The attitudes of America, the attitudes of Christians in America are some of the reasons why America is such a bad place. Like I said, I don't know how many times, I blame the church for what's wrong in America. Including your church, Mr. Whatever. What's your name? Beck? I almost forgot your name. But I can't forget that goddamn smug face of yours. Somebody ought to shut your mouth up. Forever. Maybe God will. I mean, you are a liar. You are, I mean, how could you say, all she did was ask questions. And they were good questions if you ask me. But you didn't ask me. So I'll just tell you anyway. They were good questions. And I think she made a good point. How How can, I mean, obviously there were other members of the committee asking him questions. And she just basically said, how can we know you're telling the truth? That was her basic question. Anyway, so you go ahead and support your criminals. After all, you are a criminal yourself, aren't you? Oh, did you do your were you ever in jail? Did you do your time for drug addiction? Anyway, I still didn't find any articles. Of course, I wasn't looking. I had other things to do besides dig up dirt on you, but I'm sure there might be articles there about you beating up your wife. All right. I guess I said enough. I mean, you people your staff is stupid and you're an idiot. You are such a jerk. Anyway. So that's my commentary for now. Thanks for listening.